Vanessa Kelman here. Today I'm going to be introducing you to the first book in my Pine Valley series, Searching for Home. Now, Pine Valley is a small town in Connecticut, and in this book, we'll be introduced to the town and a few of its residents as their lives intertwine. Let's read the summary and then we'll dive right in with a sneak peek inside. How would you change your life? Running from her superficial life in Washington, D.C., Adelaide Rogers is on her way up to Boston. She's a city girl waiting to get a fresh start in a new place. When Addie's car breaks down just outside Pine Valley, Connecticut, however, she unknowingly changes the course of not only her own life, but the lives of those she meets. Pine Valley is a far cry from the city, but its small town charm and a few of its residents connect with Addie in a way nothing else has. Maggie, longtime diner owner, is in a rut, and meeting Addie gives her the push to decide what she really wants. Is she content being a diner owner for the rest of her life? Meanwhile, Mike, who owns the automotive shop in town, is drawn to Addie and begins to acknowledge what's missing in his life. What would it be like to have a family? Addie never expected to change lives. She was too busy running away from her own. Besides, she's just passing through, isn't she? Let's take a peek inside. Chapter 1. Addie felt like she'd been running forever. Her lungs ached, struggling to breathe in the cool, damp air. It had to be less than a mile now. Surely it hadn't been this far when she was driving, though of course the miles had passed in a blur through the car's windows. Time had flown too as the darkness had descended. Addie paused a moment, bending over to rest her hands on her knees and suck in a few lungfuls of air. It didn't help that she was weighed down by her duffel bag. She thought about slowing her pace, but she knew between the fast approaching night and the crispness in the air she would be chilled to the bone in no time. She had started at a walk and had nearly frozen. Besides, the faster she got to civilization, the better. She was not one to enjoy nature in bright sunlight, never mind misty moonlight. One wolf's howl and she would be a goner. She was right about the distance, and less than a half hour later she was walking into a town center, panting and wiping sweat from her brow. It wasn't late. A glance at her watch said it was barely 8, but not much appeared to be open. It looked like a small town, quaint, with a few stores and restaurants, and houses dotting the distance with squares of light. She supposed if it was day that she would see a cute little post office, children pouring out of a little red schoolhouse, and a playground filled with mothers pushing tiny tots in swings. She felt as if she'd walked into a 1950s sitcom. Spotting a diner that boasted 24-hour service, she turned her steps in that direction. She could really use a cup of coffee. A bell above the door jingled and a waitress gestured toward an open seat at the counter. Addie slid onto the red vinyl seat, placed her duffel bag on the floor by her feet, and grabbed a menu from behind the napkin holder. A moment later, the same waitress flipped the coffee cup in front of her and picked up a glass pot from the percolator. Coffee? Please. The cup was poured and the waitress disappeared for a moment or two before returning, pencil poised above a pad. What can I get you? Suddenly ravenous from her run, Addie's eyes flitted over the menu. Get the salad, Adelaide. She could hear her mother's voice as clearly as if she were in the room. Add grilled chicken if you must, but don't you dare get anything else. Addie sighed. Chicken Caesar salad, please. She placed the menu back where it belonged. Her mother wouldn't approve of the Caesar dressing, but Addie was tired of bland salads with plain chicken. A girl must watch her figure. Coming right up. As she watched, Addie sipped her as she waited, Addie sipped her coffee and looked around the diner. It looked as she had expected. A family sat in the corner eating ice cream sundaes. A young couple sat at the other end of the diner by the window, gazing adoringly into each other's eyes. All that was missing was, nope, here they came. As Addie turned back toward the door, a group of high school aged boys burst in, laughing and chatting up a storm. From the attire, Addie gathered they were a sports team, and by the ball one of the boys was tossing into the air, she deduced it was basketball. The waitress who had been helping her greeted the boys with a smile. Did we win, guys? Creamed 'em, one of the boys shouted with a grin. The waitress whooped. Then pies on the house. The young men piled into a group of booths at the center of the diner, and the waitress showered them with attention, handing out thick slices of pies and glasses of water. By the chorus of "Thanks, Mags," Addie surmised that the waitress's name must be Margaret, or some derivation thereof. Funny how she hadn't even thought to ask, or look at a name tag, or something. She really used to be more observant and more outgoing than this. Maybe the stress of the past few months was taking its toll. She could hear her mother scolding her again. Adelaide, you've got to get your head out of the clouds. What are you doing here in the middle of nowhere, with people you don't know in a town you don't even know the name of? Pine Valley, Addie argued back in her mind. The boy's shirt said Pine Valley Panthers. The town must be Pine Valley. And have you ever heard of it? Addie closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She was arguing with her mother in her head. She was really starting to lose it. Never mind that her mother had been died 7 years earlier. Addie could still picture her as clearly as if she were sitting on the next stool over. And it was scary to think she still had that much control over her. But even if it was just a voice in her head, that voice did have a point. What was she doing here? She had set off looking for somewhere, anywhere, where she could get a fresh start. She had figured on driving as far as she could, then finding some city she could disappear into. New York had been her first idea, but it was so stereotypical she had resisted and kept going. Maybe Boston would be okay. Instead, her car conks out in the middle of the country. Not even the country, a freaking forest. Trees everywhere. She didn't even know if she was right next to somewhere or in the middle of nowhere. Running 5 miles proved it was the middle of nowhere. The size of this town she found was further evidence. Maybe she should ask about a car repair place, though it was probably too late for any of them to be open. She supposed she'd have to find a place to crash for the night. She would ask Mags when she returned with dinner. Once the pie was dished out, the waitress disappeared into the kitchen and reappeared with Addie's salad. The mere sight of it made Addie's mouth water, and she dug in with barely a second's thought. She would ask after she ate, which didn't take more than 5 minutes. Well, that was ladylike. Goodness, you must have been starving. Addie looked up to find the waitress staring in amazement at her empty bowl. Addie shrugged. I guess I was. Mags gave her a thoughtful look. You new here? Just passing through. My car broke down a few miles that way. Addie gestured. Tough break. Not a good place for it to stop. You walk all this way? Addie shrugged again. I ran. It was too chilly to walk. No wonder you're hungry. Can I get you something else? The pie looked delicious, but Addie resisted. No, I'm okay. It does look like I'm going to need a place to crash, though. Are there any hotels around here? Mags thought for a moment. No chains, but the Jacksons run a little motel on the other side of town, or there's a B&B the next street over. Do you by any chance have phone numbers for them, so I can see if they have a vacancy? Mags laughed. They have vacancies, trust me. I think the only time they book up is if we're hosting the sports championships, and that only happens once every few years. You shouldn't have a problem with either one. Might want to check the motel first, though. Nate and Joanna, who run the B&B, lock up kind of early. How far of a walk would it be? You said the other side of town. Mags thought a bit. Maybe 15 minutes. Town's not that big, and it's not on the outskirts. She gave a few quick directions, which Addie scrawled on a napkin. Thank you for your help. No problem. Good luck with your car. Mags left the receipt and went to check on the other patrons. Addie took a last sip of coffee, tucked a few bills under the check, and stood up. She wasn't looking forward to any more walking or running tonight, but she would be grateful for a soft bed and warm blankets. Just knowing she would be spending the next 15 minutes in a cool mist made her shiver. Bundling up the best she could in her jacket, Addie set out for the motel. Though it was dark and damp, at least now she had a few street lamps to light her way. Her initial impression of the town remained, though the buildings were a bit more modern than she had expected. Maybe the school would be a bit larger and updated than a single-room house. It didn't take long, though, to come across the motel. A dozen or so units side by side, an open sign flashing in the window of the nearby office. Addie entered the empty office and rang the bell that lay on the counter. A moment later, a middle-aged gentleman greeted her with a warm smile. Looking for a room? Addie nodded. Please. How long will you be staying? Addie paused. She had no idea how long it would take her to get her car up and running. I don't really know. My car broke down. I need to take it to the shop, and I don't know how long it'll take. Not a problem. The man smiled at her. You can stay as long as you need to. I'll put you in one of our best rooms. He grabbed a key off a board behind the counter, then gestured for her to follow him. The overhang protected them from the rain that had started to fall, though a light mist still made its way under. Addie shivered again, glad she didn't have to be out any more tonight. They stopped in front of one of the middle units, and the man handed her a key. Here you go. My name is Ed. My wife's name is Sylvie. She'll probably be the one manning the front desk in the morning if you need anything. Or you can hit the front desk button on the phone and it'll ring us right up. He smiled again. Have a good night. Thank you. Addie returned the smile and watched the man retreat back to the office before opening her room door. As she stepped inside and flipped on the light, she found a surprisingly comfortable room greeting her. Nothing fancy, but it wasn't as tacky as she had been expecting. The phone wasn't rotary, the TV was a flat screen, and the bedspread was a modern pattern, subtle flowers spread over a pale green background. Tossing her duffel bag by the desk chair to her right, she kicked off her shoes and collapsed on the bed. After a few moments of sheer exhaustion, Addie acknowledged that she should probably get up, get out of her damp clothes, and climb under the covers. And 10 minutes later, she was in heaven, letting the weight of the blanket lull her to sleep. Maggie wiped off the counter and said goodbye to the couple who had just finished their dinner. The diner had quieted down after the basketball team left, and now only the love-struck couple remained by the window, reluctant to go home. Maggie didn't mind. It was nice to have company, even if they were wrapped up in their own world. Running a 24-hour diner could be lonely sometimes in the wee hour of the morning, when few, if any, customers came in. Many times she had thought about changing her hours to those of a normal restaurant, but then someone would come in who needed her. Anne, the single mother whose kids periodically stayed with their dad, leaving her alone and lonely. Matt, the high school kid whose parents didn't understand him and his ridiculous smarts. Katie, who was torn between wanting to grow up and leave and wanting to stay curled up in safety. Pete, who just plain got lonely. They came to her late at night when the rest of the town was quiet and still, unsure what to do with themselves, needing a sympathetic ear and a comfortable stool to sit on. She gave them pie and hot cocoa, talked to them about the latest news or gossip, and let them just enjoy some company for a bit. And she knew that if she changed her hours, they wouldn't have anywhere to go. So she dealt with her own loneliness and relieved theirs. It wasn't so bad, not really. She had some college kids helping her in the kitchen for most of the night, and they kept her company. A lot of the time they were wrapped up in their schoolwork or video games or some other such thing, but they didn't mind talking to her once in a while. And really, what else did she have? A lonely apartment instead of a lonely diner? At least here she had the possibility of seeing another soul. At this point, she didn't even sleep much. It wasn't often her mind let her rest soundly. A few hours sleep tucked between the breakfast and lunch hours, with a couple extra hours between lunch and dinner, usually sufficed. What she had to think about, she had no idea, but it never failed. The instant her head hit the pillow, her mind would start wandering, thinking about the customers who had come in that day, the latest happenings in town, the bills that needed to be paid, or the latest shipment she expected to receive. Today it would probably be the young woman whose car had broken down. If she was honest with herself, it was probably a subconscious attempt to think about anything other than what she should really be thinking about, her life and the meaninglessness of it all. How many times had she thought about selling the diner and leaving this town? How many times had she longed to meet someone she could spend her life with? She had long given up on the dream of having children. She was pushing 60 now. She should be having grandchildren, not children. But she still had other dreams of seeing the world, having someone hold her close at night. She wanted to feel like she had a purpose beyond running a diner in a tiny little town, waiting for someone who needed her to come in at 2 in the morning. She supposed if she was really honest with herself, she just wanted to feel loved, needed, complete. But instead, her mind thought about everyone else and everything else, so she wouldn't focus on the depressing reality that was her life. And she was so busy avoiding the truth that she couldn't sleep. My, she was being philosophical tonight. Maggie finished wiping the counters, then made her way around the diner, straightening menus, filling napkin dispensers. She had to keep herself busy. It wouldn't do her any good to get depressed. It never did. She would still be Maggie Devon, plain Jane, with a head full of dreams that would never be. With a sigh, Maggie tossed the cleaning rag into a bucket of soapy water and wiped her hands on her apron. It was time to do the nightly drawer count. She wouldn't see many, if any, more people tonight, and this way she would know if she had to lock any up. You could never be too careful, even in a podunk town like Pine Valley. And there we go with a sneak peek. We saw Addy and we met Maggie and a little bit about where they are in their lives. If you'd like to keep going and find out where their journey takes them, check out Searching for Home, available from a variety of retailers. There will be links in the comments below. And I will see